This is ABTV, Animal Bites Television.
So every show when I'm shooting a Snake Bites episode, I'm really looking just for interesting animals that I can highlight. And of course, you know, that just is about walking around the show and seeing something. As soon as something catches my eyes, I'm gonna go wham, let me see if I can shoot that, you know? So that's what it's about. So it's just walking up and down the aisles, looking at snakes. I mean, obviously there's some great animals all over the place. I mean, everywhere you look, it's amazing. So, but we got to find the animals I want to do, and I think I'm going to start right here. Take a look at this dinosaur here. This happens to be a Paraguayan red tegu. Now, the Argentine red tegus are around, you know, a little bit more common than the Paraguayans, and they're basically the same animal, just from a different region. And the Paraguayans, believe it or not, get a little larger than the Argentines, but they're known for being extremely docile animals. This guy's name is Spook, and his girlfriend's name are Trick and Treat, and he's actually a dad this year for the first time. He's a 5-year-old male, and as you can see, these guys are absolutely adorable. As a matter of fact, there's a red tegu that's pretty popular online that's called MacGyver Lizard, that is a red Argentine tegu that is really awesome. But regardless, guys, I'm at the DuPage County Fair at the Reptile Show, the Scott Smith's All Animal Reptile Show, and it's a great place with some really cool animals. So it's going to be a real fun time. I'm just going to show off the coolest animals in the house. So this happens to be Spook's little baby, the Paraguayan red tegu. Now, you can see how different they look as babies as adults, and of course as they get to adulthood they turn more red and they lose a lot of that patterning. Now you can kind of see how I'm holding it right now. I'm not actually grabbing the animal, and that's one of the things when you're talking about baby lizards like tegus. You have to gain their trust, and if you're actually grabbing them and restraining them, that's going to cause the animal to get aggressive. So you kind of got to just let it move on its own, kind of do the treadmill situation here where I'm just going hand over hand, and eventually the animal is going to calm down and hopefully sit still for a little while. But if you do this kind of every day and just handle the animal, again, you're gaining trust with it so that it knows, all right, I'm not going to get hurt by this guy whatsoever, but you're also kind of getting into a situation where you're kind of gaining trust both ways, to be honest. But as you can see, now it's starting to calm down a little bit. They're very curious and highly intelligent lizards, so you got to treat them that way. And again, they get pretty sizable, as you can see with the dad Spook. So this isn't an animal that you should have if you don't have the ability to keep it. But one of the things that's really amazing about tegus in particular is that several people actually keep these free ranging within their household, believe it or not, and they can actually be trained in the way that they'll go to the bathroom in the exact same spot. So they almost are like a little reptilian cat or a dog, which makes it pretty cool. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should keep big giant lizards free roaming in their house, but if you have the right situation and you think you have the ability to do it, a red tegu is an awesome option for that. And I tell you what, this little guy is so cute. I want one so bad. This boa really caught my eye as it was walking around the show. Well, not the snake, but the owner was walking around the show. I thought it was maybe a Hog Island boa because you can see the tail almost looks like a Hog Island, especially with all those frecklings. But then when I actually stopped and talked to them, they told me that it was actually a hypo-motley het albino boa constrictor. And I was kind of blown away by it, but to be honest, when you look at the head, it definitely looks a little less like a hypo hog or a Hog Island boa, and definitely you can see that Colombian in there. But regardless, it's still a really beautiful animal. And again, the hypo and the motley are both codominant mutations, and then of course it's het for albino, which is the recessive mutation. But I just find this tail really interesting because any hypo motley I've seen in the past has never had that really faded, almost Hog Island boa look to it, and of course with all these freckles. So regardless, it's a really cool animal, and I have to show you guys. these little guys have always had kind of a soft spot in my heart. You know, when you kind of really love something, like I love all animals and certainly reptiles, it always goes back to your childhood. And of course, this is a Jackson's chameleon, and I can remember so vividly going into a pet shop when I was probably 6 or 7 years old and seeing a Jackson's chameleon. Back then, they were kind of the most common of all the chameleons, believe it or not. Now, these guys are endemic to Africa, but there's actually an invasive population in Hawaii. So they're pretty common to come into the country, well, at least a while ago. Now they're no longer able to be exported out of Hawaii, and you don't see them nearly as much. The interesting thing about the Jackson's chameleons are, of course, these amazing horns, which only males will have. And of course, they use them as a combat for other males, for dominance, so that they can breed the females in the area. The other thing that I find really amazing about them is that they're a live-bearing chameleon. So a lot of chameleons have eggs and they have really long gestation, sometimes up to a year or more. But believe it or not, Jackson's chameleons will have live young. So I remember working in a pet shop when I was about 16 years old, and one day coming in and seeing a big female chameleon that had 8 little baby Jackson's chameleons. And I'll never forget that experience. So again, I always think about these type of animals, and I think back to my childhood and the experience I've had, and that's what keeps my passion going. So the concept really, when I'm at these reptile shows, is, you know, I'm loving everything. You know, every time I see something, I want to mess with it. But I'm always trying to bring you guys interesting animals that maybe I haven't highlighted before or haven't highlighted in a while, or maybe I just want to share some new information, or maybe even it's a really spectacular specimen of that species that I've talked about before, but I really want to show you this one. So that gives you the idea. So I'm basically just heading out, walking up and down the aisles, trying to get an idea of what I think would be interesting for you guys to watch. You know, the truth is the experience here is so incredible, and I want to try to bring as much of the experience of being at this reptile show basically to you, so you have an idea what it felt like to actually be here. All right, guys, this is my Britney moment.
Don't you wanna?
I don't know if you guys even remember that, but when Britney Spears had the albino Burmese, this actually isn't even an albino Burmese python. This happens to be a Lucistic Burmese python. It's basically, there's what they call a hypoberm, or sometimes fireberm. They're a codominant mutation. When bred together, the superform is an all-white Burmese python. Now, unlike the retics that they have some really super white ones, the Lucies and the Burms are more like an off-white, maybe even a yellowish coloring animal. But every now and then you get a pretty white one out there. But regardless, this is a Burmese python, and it's absolutely crazy. You guys know that I've had a love affair with Burmese pythons ever since I was 15 years old. So just the thought of having a pretty much a white Burmese python was just crazy to me. As a matter of fact, Bob Clark, way back in the early 90s, brought in a pure white Burmese python and had it for about 5 or 6 years before, unfortunately, it died, and he never was able to breed it, unfortunately. So it was years and years and years that people like me that had seen that all-white snake had been dreaming about another Lucistic Burmese python. Here we go, fast forward 15 years, and we're pretty close. Not quite white, but still pretty close, and that is an amazing animal. This is a really cool colubrid snake that I had to show off. This is actually called a sunbeam snake, or a Xenopeltis unicolor. These guys are down from Indonesia area, but actually there's some Xenopeltis that range all over Southeast Asia, but you don't see them around too much, and they're very rarely kept in captivity with any major success because they're a little bit more when it comes to the requirements. But lately, you've been seeing more of them successfully kept because we're starting to understand a few things about them. First off, they need a higher amount of humidity, and because they're a burrowing snake, if you give them a really good medium like a cypress mulch or eco earth or something like that, that they can keep that humidity up as well as burrow, it reduces the stress level and also increases the aptitude for them to want to feed again. Now, these guys are typically found in like rice paddies in that area. Again, when you think of rice paddies, you think of high humidity, a lot of water, and these guys are going to burrow down into it. So now that we're starting to give them those type of environments, they're starting to do a lot better, and people are even starting to reproduce them. But of course, the sunbeam snake itself got its namesake from the fact that it has amazing iridescence to them. When you get these guys in the sun, it's just like the rainbow, and they're beautiful, beautiful animals. And of course, they have almost these white gray underscales, which are really interesting. And just a very unique snake. And whenever I see them, I definitely want to take them out. And this certainly is in the category of pretty awesome that I had to share with you guys. Certainly one of the coolest geckos, if not the coolest gecko on the planet, would be the Leachianus. There's just something amazing about these animals. Not only is it just crazy to think that a gecko can get so large, and again, this guy's only about half grown. I mean, you've seen Leachy geckos that have been a pound, pound and a half, even closer to 2 pounds. I mean, that's amazing when it comes to a gecko. But what's also cool about them is that their disposition is pretty awesome. You know, again, some of the more, the geckos that are more camouflage and can climb, they're really flighty, like the leaf-tailed geckos and the tokay geckos, whereas the Leachianus are really pretty mellow animals. That doesn't mean that they're not going to maybe take a leap or something, but it's pretty rare to get bit by them. Although when you do get bit by a Leachy, it's pretty gnarly because they have really strong jaws, but thankfully they're typically extremely docile animals. And again, this camouflage is certainly something where you can certainly see if you were walking through the forest of that area, there's no way you're going to tell that this animal is here. Again, let's take a piece of bark like this, put this up against this bark, that thing just, I mean, that is amazing. That is Mother Nature at its absolute best. But I tell you what, Leachy geckos, some of the coolest geckos in the world. This happens to be a jungle carpet python and a diamond carpet hybrid. Now, when I say a hybrid, they're actually the same genus and species, but there's a subspecies in there. And the jungle carpets stay much smaller and are more banded. They're really a black with a really bright yellow banding, whereas the diamond pythons are either black and yellow or black and white, but are more freckled out, giving this kind of diamond appearance. And they're much larger. The real true Atherton taberlins only get about 4, maybe 4.5 foot, whereas the diamond pythons can sometimes exceed 6.5, 7, and even 8 foot in length. And of course, diamonds are much more south than they are jungle carpets when it comes to where they're endemic to, which is Australia. Regardless, when you cross those two animals together, you certainly get a really spectacular animal. Take a look at these amazing tortoises. Of course, these are leopard tortoises. And back in the day, these were probably one of the most common tortoises. Now they're actually very unusual to see around. And you can see how amazing they are. Of course, these guys are from Africa, and they're not one of the giant tortoises, but they certainly get pretty large here. This is actually a male, and he's certainly sexually mature, but males will get much, much larger and actually get even larger than females. But these animals here, these are 2 males and 1 female, happen to be Scott Smith, who's my friend that runs this show, the All Animal Expo. And this female here is a pretty big female. They're not going to get much larger than that, but males will certainly outdo this. But unfortunately, this female here has been being bred by these males and been throwing 20 to 30 eggs infertile, unfortunately, which is really a bummer, because when you have an animal like this, you certainly want to see it reproduce. And hopefully, sometimes it's just a maturation thing. Again, there are certain tortoises like Galapagos Island or Aldabra tortoises, believe it or not, don't sexually mature until their mid to late 20s. So there's certainly a chance that either her or her boyfriends are just not quite ready to breed yet. So hopefully in the years to come, this girl will have some amazing, beautiful babies. And trust me, she's got a long, long way to go. She's probably going to be around for another 100 years if she's kept right. So I have a feeling she'll eventually be a mom and maybe even a grandmother one day. But regardless, guys, I hope you've enjoyed the show. There's been some amazing animals and some truly amazing people as well. And as always, I'm Facebooking and tweeting and Instagramming my way through things, guys. So make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV and on Instagram at SnakeBytes.tv. Until next week, you've been watching Snake Bites. Do me a favor, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button for not only Snake Bites, but other awesome animal videos. And if you want to watch more Snake Bites videos, go ahead and click the link right here and just watch away.